I know I'm going to be dead. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I'm going to destroy you. I'm not going to shoot his kids. I'd like to. I guess if the opportunity put itself in front of me in the next 60 days, 50 days, whatever it is, I might do it.
Are these the thoughts of a raving lunatic? Or are they the result of a town driving a man to the point where he has nothing left to lose? Our story begins in Granby, Colorado, and the final image we're working with here today is... Oop, not that. This grainy piece of shit. So, let's figure out how we got here. The year is 1989, and a 38-year-old Marvin Heemeyer had just moved into a cabin in Colorado, approximately 16 miles away from Granby. All was well in the quiet little town until 1992, when Marvin stumbled in looking to start a business. He purchased 2 acres of land at an auction for $42,000, with plans to lease it to a friend who intended to open an auto repair shop. That plan fell through, so Marvin built his own muffler repair shop instead. However, the property's existing sewage system was an old cement mixer buried in the ground. This fact was known to Marvin when he purchased the lot. For obvious safety and environmental reasons, it's illegal to operate a business by dumping your sewage into an unregulated receptacle not meant to hold raw sewage. But that didn't stop Marvin from operating anyways. He did not want to pay to connect his property to the town's sewer system because it would have cost him double what he paid to acquire the lot. He also refused the much cheaper option of installing a septic tank because he found the tiny little town's refusal to foot the bill to connect his property to their sewer lines as, quote,
extortion.
Keep in mind the population of Granby is only 2,000 people, so wanting the local government to pay for this is asking a lot. While this sewage dispute dragged on, a new crisis emerged that required Marvin's attention. Jumping forward to 1997, a local family by the name of the Dochefs were looking to expand their concrete plant that operated nearby prior to Marvin's land purchase. Granby's planning commission suggested that they purchase Marvin's property in order to avoid putting new manufacturing facilities near hotels and businesses, which was an alternative option. Marvin initially requested $250,000 to sell the lot, which the Dochefs agreed to, but Marvin then upped the price to $375,000. The family counter-offered $350,000, to which Marvin responded by raising the price even higher, all the way up to $450,000. Keep in mind that Marvin had purchased the property for only $42,000. Even after accounting for the costs he would have incurred when setting up his muffler repair shop, he almost surely would have come out ahead had he taken their highest offer of $350,000. Instead of dealing with Marvin any further, they purchased an adjacent lot. Marvin then proposed exchanging his property with the muffler repair shop for the newly purchased lot. The Dochefs agreed because they preferred the location of Marvin's lot, but Marvin decided he would now only accept the offer if they constructed an expensive building on it first. The Dochefs told Marvin to pound sand because that was a ridiculous request. So, Marvin launched a grassroots campaign to oppose the factory's expansion on environmental grounds. He initially had good success and stirred up quite the ruckus among the townfolk. However, the other residents were appeased by voluntary changes to the construction plans that would reduce dust and noise. With his supporters gone, he filed a lawsuit against the Dochefs, claiming their expansion would block access to his shop. According to everyone else involved in the case, that claim was false, but before the lawsuit was resolved, the Dochefs offered to connect the concrete plant's existing sewer line to Marvin's muffler shop in exchange for dropping the lawsuit, which was hindering their progress. Marvin hung up the phone after receiving the offer. It was around this time that the buried cement mixer became filled to the brim with sewage. Marvin's solution was to attempt to illegally connect to another neighbor's sewer line. When that plot was foiled, he pumped the sewage into a ditch behind his property. Following these fecal hijinks, the town's code enforcement began fining him for his multitude of violations. In 2001, a municipal court ordered him to cease business operations until he either installed an actual septic tank or ran pipes to connect to the town's sewer system, which he described as, quote, a form of terrorism being perpetrated against him. To recap, he refused an offer of $350,000 to sell his property and an offer to hook up his shop to the sewer system for free. Having been defeated in the legal arena, he purchased a Komatsu bulldozer for $16,000 and had it shipped to his shop. Shortly thereafter, he officially closed his business and put all of his inventory, including the bulldozer, up for sale. When no one offered to purchase the Komatsu, he interpreted it as a sign from God that he had to start his mission of vengeance. So, he sold his land in 2003 and leased half of the building back until he, quote, finished some work. Within one day of being in the new owner's possession, they connected to Granby's sewer line. With no other reason for living, he started to work on his Frankenstein. He erected a wall along his leased part of the building and changed the locks so no one could see what he was doing. He also began living inside the warehouse because he thought it was a waste of time to travel back and forth home when he could be spending that time working on the dozer instead. For 1.5 years, Marvin meticulously modified the bulldozer, and the end result was spectacular. On the exterior, he welded massive slabs of concrete and steel to protect the cabin, engine, and parts of the tracks. He also set up several cameras inside 3-inch thick bulletproof glass, which were retrofitted with compressed air canisters to blow dust away. On the interior, he wired these cameras to monitors so he could see where he was going and made 3 gun ports which housed a .22, .308, and .50 caliber rifles. For good measure, he kept 3 handguns and a week's worth of food and water inside too. To stay cool, he installed air conditioning and fans. At long last, his tank was complete.
I am going to sacrifice my life, my future.
At around 2:15 p.m., Marvin fired up the engine on his monstrosity and immediately got to work on the concrete plant across the street. After ramming into the precasting shop and generating an explosion, Cody Dochev ran over to see what the hell was going on. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing, which was several employees attempting to jam objects into the tracks of this mysterious vehicle, wreaking havoc on his factory. Cody Dochev lobbed a few shots from his handgun at it, realized that was pointless, and climbed on top. After being bamboozled by the ingenuity of Marvin, he couldn't figure out how to open the hatch, so he tried to stop the bulldozer with his own front-end loader, but the bulldozer had other plans. Marvin returned fire at the front loader and shot at sheriff's deputies and a state trooper who had just arrived on the scene. The police shot back at Marvin, but had to retreat after he plowed his dozer straight into their position. The bulletproof glass covering the cameras was proving to be very useful. After a job well done at the concrete factory, Marvin headed south at a brisk pace of 5 miles per hour. During this migration, someone from the sheriff's office dropped a flashbang down the dozer's exhaust pipe, which had no effect. Marvin had his eyes set on Granby's town hall, which was in the middle of hosting a children's story hour. After narrowly evacuating the building in time, Marvin got to work destroying the house of the local government that he thought failed him so terribly. Next, he bashed the walls of Liberty Savings Bank, aiming specifically at the corner where a woman on the zoning board worked. Marvin then knocked over some trees and light posts for good measure, as a swarm of police jogged in tow before ramming the office of the town's local newspaper. A scraper was dispatched to try and stop Marvin, but he said, "Get that weak shit out of my face!" After overcoming that minor obstacle, he rumbled his way towards a propane storage facility. He fired 15 shots at massive propane tanks, some of which contained 30,000 gallons of highly explosive material, before causing an explosion that very well could have obliterated a nearby senior citizen community. He changed targets and fired at power transformers. Marvin, however, did not have a great angle and gave up after only landing one successful shot. At this point, the police feared they were all out of options. Everything they had thrown at the dozer, from over 200 rounds of small arms fire to commandeered construction equipment, had failed to even slow down Marvin's frenzy. The governor considered calling in the National Guard to neutralize the bulldozer with an Apache helicopter or a Javelin anti-tank missile. Before any rash decisions had to be made, the town of Granby was saved by a subterranean cube known as the Gamble's Store Basement. As Marvin tore down the alleyway, one of the scrapers managed to box him in from behind. His solution was to keep plowing ahead until he created the new exit. But Marvin made a critical blunder. He had no idea the store contained a basement. Thus, one track of his dozer fell into it, rendering the vehicle immobilized.
I'm going to have to die with it, because I'm telling you, I will not live with it.
1 minute later, a single gunshot emanated from inside the bulldozer. Marvin's rampage had finally come to an end, but the damage was immense. Over the span of 127 minutes, Marvin bulldozed 13 buildings occupied by people who got on his bad side, including the Dochef concrete plant, the town hall, Sky High News, Gamble's General Store, Maple Street Builders, Mountain Parks Electric Co., Liberty Savings Bank, Copycat Graphics, his own former business, the home of a previous mayor, and a hardware store. He created an estimated $7 million worth of damage, $2 million of which was done to his arch nemesis, the concrete plant. To compound the damage, they were underinsured and only received a $700,000 payout. Authorities feared the dozer was booby-trapped, so they used 3 explosive devices to try and blast some of the steel plates off, but were unsuccessful. Eventually, they used a torch cutter to gain access, a whole 10 hours after Marvin had offed himself. A thorough investigation into the motivation to carry out such a ludicrous act uncovered some interesting things. Marvin had a handwritten list of 107 people who had crossed him, and it included various companies, judges, politicians, newspaper editors, and even the Catholic Church. They also found writings that Marvin believed God had killed several people who had opposed him.
It's a cycle. As best I can see it, God is saying that the cycle is time to happen again.
And this list of grievances etched onto a for sale sign. Further, they found his infamous quip that is widely quoted,
"I was always willing to be reasonable until I had to be unreasonable. Sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things."
The audio tapes that you've heard excerpts from were uncovered too after he mailed them to his brother in South Dakota right before starting his rampage. So, what is more likely? The entire town conspired to screw with Marvin, or Marvin was crazy and thought everyone was out to get him?
I'm not going to shoot his kids. I'd like to.